Neck circles, are they dangerous or are they good for you? Hey, I'm Dr. Notley, Winnipeg chiropractor and athletic therapist, and I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of the Own Your Spine podcast. And in this podcast, I am going to discuss with you whether or not it's safe to perform neck circles. Now, if you've never heard of a neck circle, if you're on YouTube, you can go over to my YouTube channel and you can find the neck cars or neck circles exercise. Cars are known as controlled articular rotations. They're typically slow motion movements and they take the neck through a full range of motion. You can imagine just rolling your neck around, all the way around, looking all the way up, all the way down, going through a full circle. If you go online and you start searching for whether or not it's safe to perform neck circles, this is what you're going to find. You're going to find a very common response of neck circles are dangerous. They're bad for your neck. Here are their arguments. Their arguments are that they cause damage to the joint due to compression. They cause compression to the arteries of both the vertebral artery and the internal carotid arteries, which would negatively impact our brain. And lastly, they pinch nerves. So, I'm a proponent of this exercise in the right situations. And so, before I do a video on it, I wanted to do some research and see what we really know about the neck and compressive forces and effects on the nerves and effect on the blood vessels. So, does compression damage joints? So, if I take my neck and move it through a full circle in all directions, does that cause damage? Well, first off, if I can go through that range of motion, you should venture to say that it's a relatively safe motion. You're capable of going through it without any pain or any negative consequences. So let's look at the anatomy. When we look at the anatomy of our neck, we have 7 cervical vertebrae. They're just below the skull. And a lot of their movements allow us to bring our chin down to our chest, look up towards the ceiling, look left, look right, bring our left ear to our left shoulder, our right ear to our right shoulder, and combinations of all those movements. And this motion is predominantly moving through what are known as our facet joints. When I look up, my facet joints naturally get closer together. When I look to my left, the facet joint on the left side naturally gets closer, and the facet joint on the right side naturally opens up. If I side bend to the left ear to left shoulder, the left facet gets closer together, and the right opens up. These are natural motions. If I extend my head up, look to the left, and side bend to the left, that would produce maximum compression on the facet joint. So, there are cases of people fracturing this joint, spraining this joint, irritating the joint. Typically, the fractures and sprains are as a result of some sort of high force activity, and that high force activity could be getting rear-ended where our head whips back. It could be as a result of getting T-boned, and there's that point when our head gets uh, our body moves out from underneath our head, and it causes more compression on that short side of the joint that closes down. That can cause damage. And there are also cases of irritation of the joint during suspended end range positions. For example, if you were a painter and you have to paint overhead, or you have to look up at the ceiling or higher parts of the wall, you're going to have to keep your head there for a long period of time. And that's a sustained position. And there are instances where this causes irritation. But the neck circles are traditionally done in a relatively slow pace. In the case of neck cars, we are taking approximately 30 seconds to a minute to go through one circle. So obviously, that's not a very fast movement, and it's not a very forceful movement. So based on that, we can say, hey, you know what? Neck circles are pretty safe. They're going through a natural range of motion. They are not high force or long sustained. So the likelihood of irritating this joint should be minimal. Now, if you do have some arthritis in there, you have some irritation in there that gets irritated when you go into that compressed position, well, that's going to be a movement we're going to want to avoid until things settle down. So now let's take a look at the arteries. Now we have two arteries that ultimately end up in the brain that come into our neck that can be a potential issue. And that is there are associated cases, not necessarily links, to having strokes or blood clots um, with activities that might be similar to the neck circles. For example, again, I'm going to give the example of painting a ceiling. There are cases of people ending up having a stroke after having done that particular activity for an extended period of time. There are cases of people getting their hair washed at a salon and having a stroke, and this is known as hairdresser syndrome. We also have bow hunter syndrome, and that's the result of staying in that extended left rotation or right rotation, depending on your dominance during the bow hunting. That's been associated with a stroke or blood clot. Joint manipulation has also to the neck has also been associated with it, along with some other martial arts movements. But we have to realize that a lot of these cases are rare. They're not as frequent as we may think. So what about what happens if we go through this motion, this circle? What does it do to that blood flow? Now, many studies that have looked at blood flow dynamics when we rotate our neck maximally, they actually find that there's no effect on the blood flow dynamics. So if we're looking to our left, we're really not causing any problems to the blood flow. Now, there are some other another one or two studies that actually indicate that when we are in an extended rotated position, that there is a reduction in blood flow to the carotid, the internal carotid, and the vertebral artery. And this is on the opposite side. So if I'm looking up and to my left, I'm actually affecting the artery on the opposite side. Now, this was based on healthy individuals, and the researchers concluded that this may not actually be a problem. This may be a naturally occurring thing. But something we should be aware of is that, okay, this is a normal thing, but if you are doing this movement and you are experiencing dizziness or some other neurological experience, numbness, tingling into the hands, dizziness is probably the biggest one, numbness, tingling into the face. We want to make sure that we are avoiding that movement, and on top of that, getting that assessed and having it assessed to make sure that those arteries are patent and that there is no problem occurring within these arteries. Now, lastly, do neck circles cause pinching of the nerves? So when we look at the anatomy of the neck and we look at the space where the nerve comes out, comes out of the neck on either side of the neck. This is called our intervertebral foramen. The nerves come out of there and they supply the nerves into our supply the muscles and skin in our upper extremities, in our arms and hands. This space naturally gets narrower when we look up, when we side bend to the same to the same side, rotate to the same side. Very similar to what we've been saying about the arteries and the compression on the joint. Now, this is a natural occurrence. It naturally narrows. So, if I can once again go through a full range of motion without causing any tingling or shooting pain down into my hand, there's no cause for concern. Now, the intervertebral foramen can actually get narrowed other ways. So, as we get older, we can have degenerative disc disease, which takes that disc and narrows it, which will also narrow that space. That space can also be narrowed from thickening of ligaments. We may also see narrowing from a disc herniation, and we may also see narrowing of this space from changes in the shape of the facet joint as due to arthritis. So if I have a patient who goes through a circle and experiences pain into their arm or shooting pain down into their arm, they may be experiencing pinching or irritation of this nerve. In that case, this is something to avoid. In the case of a disc herniation, once this is corrected, we should anticipate that we shouldn't have any pain. And if there's been irritation as a result of degenerative disc disease or degenerative joint disease, there's inflammation in the area and it's irritating the area, only making it worse when we go through that neck range of motion, then we need to let it settle down. And if there are cases where there's a bony spur coming from the facet joint that's pinching, it might be something that we have to consider following up with a medical doctor. And again, in this case, avoiding doing that motion. Now, it doesn't mean we can't do all the rest of the circle. We just have to make sure that we avoid that pinching part. So, those are the three arguments. And I think the problem with these arguments is what they're doing is they're trying to create fear in you to not go through that motion at all. And I don't think that's really what we are actually seeing in real life is that these aren't dangerous movements. You're taking the body through a natural range of motion. Now, if there are circumstances where you are experiencing pain going into a particular part of that range of motion, well, it's time to avoid that. Get away from it until the pain is less. I often have patients who have irritation to the facet joint where manipulation makes a big difference. And they can go through the range of motion much better. And this is called facet syndrome. Responds really well to manipulation. If I have a person who's getting tingling down into the arm, this is an opportunity to, or a great time to pursue imaging to make sure that what's causing that pain down into the arm. And so X-ray, MRI, CT scan may be necessary depending on the situation. And if you're experiencing dizziness, we need to check to see if the arteries are healthy and there's no vascular issues that might be causing some of this. So there you have it. It's not a cut and dry, this is dangerous. This is, for the most part, for most people, a healthy movement to go through. But there are situations where you might actually have to avoid it or curtail the full range of motion that goes through that the neck can go through with this exercise.